October, the furlough scheme, which
to the
has
FT's
supported up to 10 million workers
coming
jobs
to
in our
you
country,
from London.
is coming
I'm
to
Claer
an end.
Barrett.
Now, it is going to be replaced by
today
the job
we're going to be talking about a
topic
scheme
that is on a
Chancellor
lot
has
of people's
devised.
minds.
Full details
at
of
the
that
moment,
aren't available
redundancy.
yet, but
we
now
do
in
know
the UK
that
we
it's
have a
not going to be
situation
anywhere
where
near
at the
as
end of
generous
October
as
the
the
furlough scheme has been.
So
Supported up to 10
economists,
million
trade
workers
unions,
jobs in
even
our
the Bank of
country
England
is coming
they're
to
all
an end.
predicting
Now it is
that
going
the
to be
numbers of
replaced by
redundancies are going
the
to job
shoot up
between
support
now
scheme
and Christmas.
Chancellor
Now,
has
that's a
devised.
pretty
Full details
horrible
of that aren't
situation
available
to
yet,
be in
but
for many
we do know
individuals, and we
that
know
it is
that
not
there
going to
are
be
people
anywhere near
watching
as
who've
generous
got
as the
have
furlough
specific
scheme has
queries
been. So
about what it means
economists,
for them,
trade
and their
unions, even
financial
the Bank
future,
of England,
but it's
they're
also
all
a very
predicting
tricky
that the
situation right
numbers
now
of
for
redundancies
businesses,
are going to
particularly
shoot up
small
between
businesses
now and
who don't
Christmas.
have
Now,
the recourse
that's a
to their
pretty
own
horrible
in-house
situation
HR
to be in
department.
for
Now,
many individuals.
in the course of
and
the
we know
next
that there are
half hour,
people
while we're
watching
live, we
who've
will be
got,
taking your
specific
queries
about
whether
what
you're
it
a
means
small
for
business
them and their
or an
financial
individual,
future with a
but it's
query about
also a very
redundancy.
tricky
You can
situation
put it
right
to
now
me
for businesses,
and to Lindsay
particularly
Cook, the
small
FT's
businesses
money
who
mentor
don't have the
columnist,
recourse
who's going
to
to
their
be with
own
me
in-house
for the next 30
HR
minutes
department
to give
now,
her views
in the course of the next
on
half
the
hour,
kinds of
while we're
questions
live, we
that
will
you're
be
facing
taking
at
your
this crucial
questions,
time.
whether you're a
Businesses
small
as the
business
support
or an
system
individual.
changes with
So
a query
if you
about
want to ask us,
redundancy, there are lots
and
of
to
ways that you
Lindsay
can do it.
Cook, the
If you're
FT's
watching us
money
on
mentor
ft.com,
columnist, who's going to be
you can
with
just
me
comment
for the
below
next
the
30
ft.com
minutes to give her
article,
views
and that will get to
on
me
the
on
kinds
my
of
iPad.
questions that
If you
you're
are
facing
watching
at
us
this
on
crucial
YouTube, the
time
live
for
chat
businesses
on
as the
YouTube should
support
be enabled,
system
and to
changes.
all of the people
So
who are
if you
logging
want
in
to ask us
to
a
watch us
question,
live
it's very
on
easy. There are lots of
LinkedIn,
ways that you
the
can do
same
it.
applies
If
there.
you're
If you leave
watching
a
us on
comment in the live chat,
ft.com,
it will
you can
get
just
to me
comment
and I can put
below
it to
the
Lindsay.
ft.com
Now, we've already had
article,
that will get to me
lots
on my
of
iPad. If you are watching us on YouTube, the
there are-
live chat
oh,
on
okay.
YouTube
There
should
has
be
been an
enabled,
issue,
and
and we're
to
going
all
to
of
need
the
to
people
start
who are
again.
logging in to watch us
Okay,
live
well,
on LinkedIn,
we'll be back with you if you are
same
watching us
applies
now.
there. If you leave
Very
a comment
shortly,
in the live chat, it will get to me. And
thank
I
you
can
for
put
bearing
it to
with
Lindsay.
us
Now,
with
we've
this
already
small
had
technical adjustment.
lots of there are. Oh, okay. There has been an issue, and we're going to need to start again. Welcome to the FT's Business Clinic, live with me, Claer Barrett, the FT's Consumer Editor, for the next half an hour. Now, the topic that we're going to be talking about today with our expert, Lindsay, is all about redundancy. Now, we know that this is an issue that is absolutely front of mind for individuals as well as businesses at the moment. In the UK, the government's furlough scheme, which has supported the wages of up to 10 million workers in the UK, is going to be coming to an end at the end of October. It will be replaced by the job support scheme. We're awaiting more details on that, along with businesses up and down the land, but it's not going to be anywhere near as generous. Now, because of that, economists, the Bank of England, trade unions, they're all predicting that the number of redundancies in Britain are going to absolutely shoot up between now and the end of the year. So it's a crucial point for individuals to know their rights, but also for companies and small businesses in particular who don't have the luxury of their own in-house HR department, who nevertheless have lots of queries about the right way to proceed into the uncertain future. So we can already see from questions that have come in for us on ft.com that there are lots of areas that you want to cover today. We're happy to take questions about the job support scheme. We're happy to take questions from individuals who want to know about their employment rights, and also from companies who want to know about the process that they have to go through. Now, for the next 30 minutes, you can put your questions to us live. I'm joined by Lindsay Cook, who is the FT's Money Mentor columnist and an absolute authority on the world of work as well as the world of finance. Now, she's happy to give her views on questions from businesses and from individuals. So if you want to ask Lindsay a question, you can do that. If you're watching on ft.com, comment below the article online. That will reach me on my iPad. If you're watching us live on YouTube, then you can use the chat function to put a question to me. And if you're one of the people logging in to watch us on LinkedIn, you can also use the LinkedIn chat function, and we'll get through as many questions as we can in the next half an hour. So, Lindsay, let me start with some questions for you, and thank you for joining us this morning. Now, when it comes to redundancy, you've been on both sides of the table throughout your career.
I have. Having worked in the media industry for quite a few years, I've actually been made redundant 5 times, and they were all a little bit different. I've also managed redundancy programs when I was in newspaper management for more than 100 people at a time. And on one occasion, I managed to get 130 people to leave a business voluntarily, and they all wanted to go, and we kept the people who wanted to stay.
Well, that's really good to know, and a unique perspective as somebody, as you say, who has been made redundant 5 times and had to, live through that experience, as well as being inside a company when those decisions are being taken. So, obviously, at the moment, there's a lot of information for businesses of all sizes to take in with the transition from the furlough scheme to the new job support scheme. Now, from an employer's perspective, what kind of conversations do you think will be going on right now as businesses consider the options ahead?
I think they'll be looking at whether the new job support scheme offers enough, because it's about £600 a month for employees and it won't cover their bills. It's also how much work they're going to have, whether their business is thriving. Most employers don't want to make people redundant and then find they're short of staff. So it's a very difficult business plan, working out what you need, how many you need. Often it might be a way of getting through the situation by saying, will people take a pay cut while you decide whether your business has a future, whether it has a strong future? It has to be negotiated. You can't impose it on people. But quite often, employees would all rather suffer a little bit of pain than know that 2 or 3 of their colleagues are going to suffer a great deal of pain.
Well, thanks for that answer, Lindsay. Certainly, we are getting questions coming in about people who have taken pay cuts. We'll come on to some more of those details later on. But from now, judging by the overall tone of the comments and the questions that we're being asked, one of the biggest questions is who is entitled to redundancy pay in these kinds of situations?
Well, the statutory redundancy scheme, which isn't that generous, relies on you having 2 full years of employment by the day you leave the company. It's not the day the redundancies are announced, it's by the day you leave the company. If you've got less than 2 years, then you don't qualify at all. But it might be that you work for an employer that offers more than the minimum scheme, and your contract will then say what you would be entitled to. And some companies, as soon as you've covered your probationary scheme period, they will pay redundancy out, and some of them will pay a month per year. They'll probably give you pay in lieu of notice, and sometimes that's as generous as a year. But that's for professional people who are, when they're recruited, they're very much in demand, and therefore they have the best contracts.
So your key message for anyone who is worried about being made redundant as an individual is that they should get into the filing cabinet and dig out their original employment contract. What are the kind of things that they should be looking for when they read it?
If there is pay in lieu of notice, what it says about their bonus. Most bonuses are discretionary, but what it says about their bonus, how it will be earned. They should probably look at a bit of the history of their company and see what has been paid in the past, because custom and practice can help. If there was a round of redundancies last year and everybody got 1 month's notice for each year of service, then it's likely that they'll probably have to do that now. If another department had redundancies earlier in the year, maybe nothing to do with you, but they had different terms, it could be that you could argue that you should get better terms. You also have to look at your holiday, what entitlement you have there, and other things. You may be able to get some outsourcement or some training as part of your negotiations. It's getting as much as you can, finding out from other colleagues and rivals what is a benchmark for your industry. If other companies have given certain deals, you may be able to say, well, so-and-so gave their employees this training, or they gave them a week on a holiday, or whatever it is that you can ask for. But it's look at what is normal and try and get a bit more than that.
Okay, so readers have been debating who is at the most risk of redundancy. Obviously, we had lots of comments last week from the Chancellor about jobs that are viable. Now, one FT reader, Godless, asks, is it not true that the majority of those who are still on furlough will have employment contracts that are less than 2 years old, so they will be entitled to nothing and receive nothing? Your views, Lindsay?
I don't think that's the case, because I know of one very large company and it furloughed a lot of its older workers who were probably anxious about meeting the public at the height of the virus earlier on. And so they furloughed people who were older. And younger employees who say, well, we work harder anyway, so they kept us on. A lot of people will have less than 2 years service, and some companies may opt to choose them because they're cheaper to get rid of, but they have to have a proper selection policy. They can't just say, oh, all those don't get any redundancy money, we can get rid of them. They've got to look at their disciplinary record, their appraisals, their attendance, what qualifications they have, whether they've gone, what record they've got in their file about going beyond their requirements and all those sort of things. You've got to do it fairly. If you get rid of somebody who is cheap to get rid of, they can still come back and try and take an unlawful dismissal case.
Now, we'll get on to the consultation rules in a second. There's a couple of questions that involve them. But in the meantime, LinkedIn, if you're on LinkedIn, you can send me a comment in the live stream, either a question for Lindsay or your view on what's going on. I know we've got a lot of HR professionals on that community who are watching us. John Toppin on LinkedIn says, many of the jobs that the government is not helping due to being unviable have been made unviable solely by the government's restrictions. For example, in the hospitality industry, he comments, this is economic euthanasia done by the state. Well, some strong feelings there. If you've got a comment you'd like to share with us or a question, then please get them in. In the meantime, with the consultation rules, Lindsay, now lots of really big companies, Whitbread, many of the retailers, they've already announced that they want to make redundancies because they have to comply with the time limits if they're making certain numbers of staff redundant. So just talk us through how that consultation process works and what the rules are.
Well, if you're making more than 100 people redundant or intend to, you have to have 45 days consultation until the first person departs. Between 20 and 99, it's 30 days consultation. And that should be collective consultation. It shouldn't be one-on-one, although it's good if you talk to everybody individually. You should talk to a representative of those people who are at risk of redundancy so that they can put the points. It may be a trade union, it may be a professional association. It may be somebody who's been selected from the people who are at risk of redundancy. Below 20 redundancies, there are fewer of them. See them individually. They can leave as soon as you've sorted out the agreement, but giving people time. Any employer, they hate making people redundant. They feel they're suffering more than the people they're making redundant, but that isn't the case. Each person who's losing their job is suffering more than the manager who is making them redundant. And therefore, they deserve a moment of consultation so they can say, well, maybe I could work shorter hours, or maybe I could become a freelance and do this bit that nobody else can do while I look for other work. So giving them the opportunity to put their ideas means that when they do finally leave, if they finally leave, they don't feel that they haven't been heard.
Well, great advice there, Lindsay. Comment coming in from FT reader Alistair, who's watching us on ft.com. He says, for many people, redundancy is the most stressful life event after bereavement and divorce. Well, completely agree with you there. A good place to get impartial support is the government's money advice service. They have loads of information, including a redundancy pay calculator, which tells you the statutory minimum that you're entitled to, and a budget planner to help you see where your money goes if money is tight. Well, thanks for that, Alistair. Very grateful for your comments. Now, the next question comes in from Amanda. Congratulations, Amanda, because you're going to have a baby shortly. But she asked Lindsay if pregnancy offers any protection from redundancy. Now, Amanda, she says she's been on furlough. She fell pregnant in May. The company's business has been extremely affected by the pandemic. There are lots of people who are still on furlough. They mentioned that they might make some people redundant at the end of October, and I wonder if I can be protected from losing my job as my maternity leave would start in January. Well, your broader comments on maternity, please.
Well, you can't be selected for redundancy because you're pregnant or because you're on maternity leave or paternity leave. But it doesn't protect you 100%. People have to be selected on true basis, their skills, their service record, their recent appraisals, all those things. Now, it doesn't mean you're automatically going to go, but an employer is very nervous of making somebody who is pregnant or on maternity leave redundant. And in fact, if you're already on maternity leave and they're making people redundant, they should be looking for other work for you if there are redundancies in your department. So it's a very tricky area. But as with everybody who is at risk of redundancy, there is great consternation, and it has to be done fairly. There should be selection criteria. They should be worked out properly, scored properly. People usually should have an appeal process. And I've known appeal processes where one person who was, shall we say, a little bit lippy, was being chosen by her line manager to be made redundant. When we looked at the criteria, she scored more highly than she'd been given on a couple of areas. And over the next 4 years, her job was saved. Over the next 4 years, she was promoted about 4 times. She became the most loyal employee I ever came across. So it's, again, employers can benefit from learning how much people want to stay with them.
Well, great perspective there, Lindsay, which just shows why you're the best expert to have on here. If you do want to ask a question, we've got some more coming in now, either on ft.com, leave a comment below the line for us, or on YouTube and LinkedIn, you can use the live chat. So we've got a question coming in from Mark. Now, he has been made redundant. He says, as will be the case for many people, I have accrued an unusually large number of untaken holiday days over the past year. As part of my redundancy, my employer has requested that I use up my untaken holiday allowance during my gardening leave / notice period. Is this standard business practice, or is it reasonable for me to be paid for untaken holiday in addition to my notice period? What do you think, Lindsay?
I'm afraid it is. These are strange circumstances. I would think in days of old, companies wouldn't require you to do this, but they've always been able to do so. And so many people who are being made redundant at the moment will be having sort of 20 or 30 days holiday accrued that they haven't used. The rules are, if an employer wants you to take holiday, they've got to give you twice as much notice as the holiday. So if they want you to take a week's notice, they've got to tell you 2 weeks before that they want you to take a week's notice. Now, Mark might have a short gardening leave period and he might be able to save some of his holiday, but for an awful lot of people, they lose their holiday because of that. It may seem unfair, but it's how it works.
Well, a great answer there, Lindsay. Sorry, Mark, that it may not have been what you wanted to hear, but good to know about these things before wasting your time battling against your employer. Now, a question now about the furlough scheme coming in from Justine. She says, I've been made redundant, but prior to that, I had been furloughed. According to my contract, throughout my 3-month notice period / garden leave, I should have been getting my full salary. However, as I'd been furloughed, I was only getting 80%. I've disputed this salary reduction with HR, but they stick to their stance. I mean, Lindsay, this is going to be the case for an awful lot of people who are furloughed and are now facing redundancy. What are the kind of things they need to be aware of?
Well, it was announced on July 30 that as of the next day, any redundancy payments would be based on your full normal salary, and that includes your notice period. So you can find that easily on Google. And in fact, one employer fell foul because he was cutting the redundancy payments of senior executives, and he apologized and decided not to do it after a bit of publicity. So that is, there's case law. It was announced on July 30. Absolutely, they don't want people to get less redundancy than they should get.
Okay, so that should be fairly cut and dry. Justine, we wish you luck as you negotiate with your employer. A related question to that is about how redundancy pay is treated, both in the eyes of the UK tax system and also the UK benefit system. Now, the money that you receive up to a certain point is tax-free.
Yes, the first £30,000 of redundancy is tax-free. If you get pay in lieu of notice, that's taxable. If you get if you get holiday pay, that's taxable. But the first 30,000 is tax-free. Unfortunately, if you have that as a lump sum, it means you don't get universal credit, but you can get job seekers allowance if you are looking for work, and it's only £74 a week, but you might as well claim it. You can claim it for 6 months. It's not means tested, and it gets you into the throes of going to a job centre or looking online for work, and it just gets you, and it may pay some bills. It may pay for your groceries for the 6 months.
Well, thanks very much for that, Lindsay. Now, we're getting some quite specific queries coming in now over YouTube. I should point out, we'll ask Lindsay for her views on these, but obviously people who are watching us, do be aware that, this isn't individual legal advice. This is what we think in general terms about the questions that are being put for us. So a lady called Alina, who is watching us on YouTube, she says, can an employer give 2 days notice to terminate my employment contracts on the basis of redundancy, even though I have a 3-month notice period? I mean, these sudden kind of decisions that firms are making, unfortunately, are, a product of our times, but obviously there are laws that have to be adhered to.
Well, it depends how many people are being made redundant. If she's the only one, it is possible, but they still have to pay for the 3 months. So it gives her extra time to go looking for a new job. And she needs to look at her contract and make sure she gets any pay in lieu of notice, any holiday, anything she's entitled to. Is she entitled to a bonus? Is that something that she could look at? And it may be that the bonus year isn't over, but what's reasonable for her to get on the measurable outputs that she's supposed to achieve during her year. It may be that she can get help from a lawyer. Some employers will provide £500 for a legal consultation. It helps them if they pay £500 out and you see that they're being fair and you agree to the terms, then they don't have lots of management time taken up with you. So it saves them money, but it also means you know you've got the best deal you can. It may be a lot less than you want, but if you've looked at the terms, looked at what's possible, you go away thinking, well, I fought my corner.
Okay, now we're getting some more comments coming in on LinkedIn. Again, use the live chat if you want to send a comment or a question. I think from people who work in HR, which we welcome. Maeve is one of them. She returning to the question from Amanda about how much of a protection maternity leave is from being made redundant. Maeve adds that restructuring is a good enough reason to terminate someone on maternity leave, echoing Lindsay's comments that it's not a silver bullet. We also have some questions about remote working, which are quite interesting, coming in from Adam Desmond on YouTube. Thanks for your comments, Adam. Now, Lindsay, he wonders what will happen to employees who are asked or whose jobs could potentially be carried out by a remote global workforce. You know, this situation that because of the pandemic, people have been working from home, have been able to do their jobs, over the internet. What's to stop firms from saying, well, if we can do things over the internet, we could employ people to do that in Estonia or a country outside of the UK? I mean, it's an interesting point.
It is, and I'm afraid a lot of companies may be looking at this. Many years ago, I was involved with a company that exported many of its jobs to India, and they brought most of them back because in the end, they found that it cost them about the same as employing remote workers in Yorkshire. Now, it's a matter of, do you get it right? Some jurisdictions, if you put work to somewhere like India, you can finish a day at 5 o'clock and the completed work is there when you get back at 9 o'clock. I'm not encouraging it, but some companies will be looking at it. But really, the people they have working for them, they've got to look at the costs. Costs usually rise as soon as you sign a contract in India or somewhere else. The cost of the people that you're employing over there rises substantially, and you don't make the savings you think you're going to. And you can sometimes have language difficulties. And if you've got employees here, that to my mind, there is a loyalty to them, but there is a big worry in a lot of people who are doing data inputting and things like that, that their jobs will go.
Well, a great answer, Lindsay. And I can see Adam has already responded to you on YouTube. He says, I know it's a brutal question, but it's one that we need to consider in the same way that everyone has embraced these new working tools, so that employers are now realizing there is a global workforce to pick from. Well, thank you so much, Adam, for your comments. It's one of the great things about doing these interactive videos is that you just never know what's going to come up and who is going to be on the other side of the screen asking a question. On the subject of questions, we've got quite a few to get through in the next 5 or 10 minutes. FT reader James St. Patrick asks, my brother was employed by a PLC on January 2020 on a full-time contract, so before the pandemic. He was on probation, but he wasn't put on furlough, and then he was made redundant in mid-September and told that there was no redundancy package. Do you think he might be able to pursue a claim for redress? Well, I mean, Lindsay, based on that information, if you were in this situation, what were the things that you would look into?
Well, most probationary periods are for 3 or 6 months. So we have to assume that his brother successfully completed his probation and therefore was an employee. Now, if his contract, look to his letter of contract, it may have pay in lieu of notice. He's unlikely to get redundancy unless the company offered enhanced redundancy terms. I have known people in the past not to even join a company, but a redundancy program goes ahead and they got their 3 months notice even if they didn't join it. So it's worth looking at the contract for that, and whether there were enhanced redundancy terms. There's also the possibility of holiday pay. Unlikely that a newbie would have a bonus scheme, but it's worth looking at what is custom and practice in that organization, what they have paid other people. And in the past, I've come across people who've done really rather nicely when they were newly joined to a company. They have, older employees or longer serving employees have felt they have been dealt unfairly because the new joiners have done better.
Well, quite a question. Now, some more that are coming in. There's one here about voluntary redundancy. Now, this is something that often companies will do a voluntary redundancy program before launching any compulsory redundancies as a way of softening the blow. Now, one FT reader who is amusingly called "Our Monarchy are Parasites," hello to you there, can guess what your views are about the royal family. Anyway, they say, my mother is applying for voluntary redundancy and is near retirement, 57. Well, not that near. Beyond the calculation on the government's websites, notice period pay and holiday entitlement, is she entitled to anything else from her employer if she takes voluntary redundancy? Lindsay, in this situation, what are the kind of things you're thinking of?
Well, again, it's looking to the contract, it's looking to what other people within the business have received as part of their redundancy payment. There may have been extra gratia payments for various things in the past. She may have a bonus scheme, she may not. Yes, if she's being made redundant, she should apply for job seekers allowance. And she's 57, it's the number of years she's got, claim them all. Is it statutory redundancy? Is it better than statutory redundancy? You can't change your mind once somebody's employed by you. And people who've got longer service often have the better contracts because they were taken on at a time when there was less redundancy and there was probably better loyalty to your employees.
And with voluntary redundancy schemes, obviously, if the company you work for launches a scheme, what kind of people might want to think about taking voluntary redundancy? What are the kind of pros and cons?
Well, the people who usually want to take voluntary redundancy are the ones who feel that they can get another job straight away, or they want to go back to university, or they want to start their own business. Or some of them may go to their company and say, can I have a contract for, I don't know, 5,000 a year to do this little bit of my old job just to get me started up, running that as a full-time business. Lots of people have other things. Redundancy can be something that makes them sit up and think, I'm wasting my time here. I want to start something different. And if I stay here forever, I'm not going to feel satisfied. So it can be sometimes even making a hobby into a business. So all those things, unfortunately, the people most likely to volunteer are sometimes the hardest workers, probably the ones with the most initiative, and the ones that the company doesn't want to lose. So you've got to bargain. Often voluntary redundancy is slightly better than compulsory redundancy terms because, as I said earlier, employers don't like dealing with redundancies. They don't want people who are weeping in their office about it's the end of their career. So they want people who are going out and thinking, maybe this is going to be the making of me. And I know somebody who took redundancy, and I saw his name on a Booker long list a couple of years ago. So it made him write his novel.
Wow. Okay. Well, that's a positive thought to hold on to. I'm just going to zip through some other questions that are coming in from FT readers. Rob asks, under the current furlough scheme, employees on furlough, contract permitting, were allowed to have another job while they were furloughed. Does the same still apply for the new job support scheme starting in November? What do you think, Lindsay?
Well, the details haven't been published yet, but looking at the way the Chancellor announced the self-employed scheme, and it was all the terms were the same. If you're self-employed, you had to get your earnings not from dividends, you had to have less than £50,000 a year profit, you had to have more than half your earnings from your self-employment. Those were going to continue. So I think there is a chance that this may continue. They're trying, it complicates things terribly if they change the rules. They can change the sums, and that can be done on a spreadsheet very easily. If they change the rules, it may make it difficult. And it may make it difficult for somebody who's on furlough at the moment, working, quite a few people are doing charity work, but working for someone else. And then this new scheme comes in, their employer wants them to continue, but it's lower money. It just complicates things. So my gut instinct would be that it will continue, that you will be able to, but they haven't published the details yet, and it's coming in November. So it's watch this space, because they must produce the details probably on a Friday night, but they must produce the details soon.
And I was having a conversation with a friend yesterday who is being told under the new job support scheme, the employer wants her to work a set amount of hours every day for 5 days a week, like 5 hours a day or 4 hours a day for 5 days. Whereas in order for her to get another part-time job, it would be much easier if they could say, well, work Monday and Tuesday and half of Wednesday. So I mean, there are going to be a lot of these kinds of negotiations.
Travel costs for working 4 hours a day are just as expensive as working 8 hours a day, and it can make it not viable for you as an employee.
There's lots to think about there. Now, FT reader called RJMJ Home says, my daughter, she's 23, she works in fashion. Her and all of her colleagues have been asked to take a 10% pay cut or bonuses and lose the majority of their clothing subsidy. Now, they're required to wear the clothes that they sell at work. She's also been told she can't bring her assistant manager back from furlough, which means she can't take more than 2 consecutive days off for the foreseeable future. Do you have any comments to make on that particular situation?
Well, employers can't insist that you abide by new rules, and it's a matter of they have to negotiate. This may be what they want.
Oh. Have we lost Lindsay? Okay, on my screen, Lindsay has frozen. Now, I'm not sure, we only had one question left from a reader coming in. So what I'm going to do is to wrap things up for today, because we've got quite far into our 30-minute slot. Thank you ever so much to all of the readers and our audience on YouTube and LinkedIn who have asked us questions. I do hope that the answers that we've provided have given you food for thoughts, and obviously this isn't a problem that's going to go away. We will come back to this topic again in future FT business clinics. For now, you can join in again to watch us. Next week we'll be back at the same time, Tuesday, just after 12 noon, and I will be looking to take your questions again then. But in the meantime, thank you for joining us today.